Hello, everybody, and welcome. So nice to have you here with us today for this amazing keynote speaker, Omer Soker. Today, we're here to talk about circular fashion and systematic change, two really big topics and something really important to all of us. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're on, wherever you may be, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Hello, I'm Celeste Tesariro, and I am the program lead for the ReclAIMEd program. So, firstly, I want to get you to do a little activity. I want you to ask yourself, are you wearing clothes today? And if the answer is yes, then today is for you. And now what I want you to do is I want you to have a look at what you're wearing. And while you're having a look at it, I want you to ask yourself these questions. Do you know where it was made? Do you know what it's made of? Do you know who made it? And don't feel bad, because the answer is generally no for most of us. And I think that's a good place to start, to acknowledge we have a disconnect from our clothing. And that disconnect is part of the problem that we're facing with the fashion industry. And it's a huge problem. So by the time I finish this sentence, 5 truckloads of textiles will be landfilled or incinerated. Just let that visual sink in for a minute. 5 truckloads. And as we're letting that sink in, another 5 truckloads are being landfilled or incinerated. And did you know that 1/3 of new clothing in Australia goes straight to landfill? So that's clothing still with tags on it that hasn't been worn, goes directly to landfill. We have a huge problem. But luckily, with huge problems, it's beautiful opportunities for innovation, creative solutions, and the ReclAIMEd program is one of them. So firstly, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Celeste, and I'm a sustainability director at Sonsai Studios. I've worked as a sustainability manager for luxury fashion brands in the UK and in Australia. And my foray into sustainable fashion was through being a fashion designer. So I've been a designer for 15 years. 5 of those was having my own sustainable fashion brand. And, I think it's only having that very intimate knowledge and experience of producing clothing that you see the detrimental effects that the fashion industry is having on people and the planet. And I've had some traumatic experiences, and I've seen things that would really rock you and shock you. And I think from those experiences, you can't not be passionate, and you can't not be a bit angry, and you can't not want to make a change. So that's my drive, and that's why I'm here today and so excited to be running the ReclAIMEd program. What is ReclAIMEd? Let's quickly go into that. So for those of you who don't know yet, we are excitedly launching ReclAIMEd last week and this week. So the ReclAIMEd program in a nutshell is we have brand partners, so fashion labels, looking at their own waste, looking at their dead stock, and then they've got the opportunity to reimagine it, reinvent it, reuse it, repurpose it, and hold that value, which I know Omer's going to speak about later, keeping clothing at its highest value and creating that circular system and also systemic change, looking at, are we overproducing? Should we be producing a little bit less? So this program is so much more than just a creative opportunity for brands. It's changing the way we think and changing the way companies think. And that's why it's so important. And I don't say this lightly, and it's not something that I would throw around willy-nilly, but I do believe the ReclAIMEd program can change the fashion industry. And that's why we are so excited to be here talking about this today. If you didn't catch the podcast last week, I'd love you to listen to that. We have amazing brand partners speaking. We also have the head of B Corp New Zealand, and we have Siaka from Africa. We've got an amazing conversation, really well-rounded about fashion waste. So if you would like to listen to that, you can head to the website, and that's MOAH, MOAH.earth/ReclAIMEd. And you can read a little bit more about the ReclAIMEd program there too. Lastly, before I introduce you to Omer, the word ReclAIMEd is an umbrella term that we're using at AIM for a lot of different programs, a lot of creative ideas and big picture thinking. So there's going to be more exciting stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks and exciting announcements. So stay tuned for that. Without further ado, Omer Soker. So we are very fortunate to have him here today. He is the CEO of Charitable Recycling Australia. And when we talk about this problem we have of items going to landfill, Charitable Recycling Australia, with their 3,000 plus charity partners, diverts over 1 million tonnes of items from landfill every year. So he is the perfect person to speak to this, and he has real passion and knowledge around these system changes that we need, which is amazing. Omer is also a professional speaker and facilitator, and he focuses on accelerating social, environmental, and economic impact. Personally, I'm really excited because I've heard Omer speak before on a panel discussion at the University of New South Wales. I actually contacted him straight after and said, I didn't hear enough from you. I want to hear you speak more. So I'm really excited for today. I hope you get something out of it too. So I'm going to hand it over to Omer to explain the amazing work that he does and why this is so important.
Oh, thanks, Celeste. Thanks for having me. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm coming to you today from the land of the Gundungurra people, and I too pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm so excited because I'm so inspired by the work of AIM. Really, I mean, what you do in fostering mentoring, imagination, and a fairer world. I mean, really, doesn't get better than that, does it? And you've got your ReclAIMEd program. So I think our organizations have got so much in common about kind of social, environmental impact. Cool. So let's get started. Let me bring my screen up here. So okay, cool. So I'm Omer. I'm CEO of Charitable Recycling Australia, and we champion the circular economy for a sustainable environment and an equitable society. So similar to you, that's social and environmental impact. Celeste has already mentioned that, there's 3,000 charity shops. There's also like 500 million household items we keep in circulation, which is a staggering number. So Celeste has asked me to talk about the importance of reuse and clothing circularity, also the work we're doing with the Australian Fashion Council in creating a solution for textile waste, and also how you can get involved with systemic change. So I really want to hear from you as well. So how about I talk for like 20, 30 minutes, and then we can do some Q&A, because I would really love to hear from you. So, okay, let's get going. Now, I've been looking at your website and the ReclAIMEd program, and I love these 3 things that you've got. I mean, just reimagining waste for good is amazing. You've got that stat, 85% of textiles thrown away, and also educating and uplifting kids in need. These 3 really resonated with me. So I want my update to follow these 3 formats. So I'll talk a little bit about reimagining the change that's needed. Secondly, we'll look at some data and evidence so we can inform our decisions based on that rather than myths and kind of misconceptions. And then thirdly, I want to close on the power of youth and how you can get involved. So, okay, first step, reimagining waste. But what we want to do first is reimagine the government's definition of waste. Language is super important because it defines what we measure, what we value, and what the outcomes will be. So, while you're reading this is from the government's kind of waste policy. You'll notice in there, did you notice the word reuse? So the government defines reuse as waste, which basically means that they've defined everything going to charity as a waste, which, I think is pretty dysfunctional. The unintended consequences of that is it kind of undermines one of the best things that we can do as citizens and consumers, which is reuse products and extend their life. It can also kind of devalue the amazing work of charities, and it gives this negative association of charities and as waste outlets, which is so not true. And it can also block the opportunity for reuse to be integrated in policy and funded. So if we look at this definition literally, can I show you an image of waste? So this brand new Louis Vuitton handbag, don't know how much it costs, but it would be fairly exy. When it's donated to charity, it's waste, really? Because the government defines the actions as kind of unwanted, surplus, discarded, left over as being the activities. But what about gifting? What about gifting as a present? Because I see a donation to charity as a gift, as a resource. It's almost like a present you would give someone. It's not a waste. So really, at the moment, with language, there's no difference between a dirty diaper that's donated to charity or a vintage dress. But to charities, it makes a big difference. To the environment, it makes a difference. A diaper is not a donation. So we're asking the government to reclassify donations from waste as a resource so that reuse is valued. We need donations to be seen as gifts and the inherent value instilled in that. Language really, really matters because fundamentally it's a starting point for systemic change. How many of you are familiar with the waste hierarchy, which is also another systemic change mechanism? This is a universally respected tool that protects the environment with a hierarchy of actions from the most favorable to the least favorable based on sustainability. It's brilliant. Everybody agrees with it. Everybody loves it. Everybody quotes it. Everybody gives it lip service, but not many people actually use it, including governments. So let's run through this one. Okay, at the very top is avoiding. And we're not saying totally avoid consumption, but we're kind of saying, look, if you've got 500 pairs of shoes, really, you could certainly avoid buying the 401st pair. The other one, the second most effective is reduce. And Celeste, you touched on this as well in terms of reducing consumption and production, because that will immediately have a correlation to reducing waste. So the conversations that we're having now through the clothing product stewardship scheme, which I'll chat about with the brands, is about future sustainability. So can volume production and consumption be reduced to save on waste and to save on costs? But at the same time, could durability be increased for reuse? People getting paid fair wages, but also maybe you've got better value in those products so they last longer, and ultimately maybe the same profitability for brands. So there's a conversation there where it can actually be a win-win. Reuse, you can see it's right at the top, highest and best use. This is a no-brainer. It's not even a complex conversation. Really, we just need to extend the life of our garments or our products for environmental impact. Also for social impact, given much of reuse in this country is through the charitable sector. But it also creates economic activity. There's reuse creates 200 jobs per 10,000 tons. And you compare that with recycling, which is further down the hierarchy, it was about 9 jobs. So environmentally, economically, socially, reuse is an absolute no-brainer. It's easy, it's obvious, and it's kind of one of the simplest things that we can do. You go down the hierarchy, repair, again, that's a no-brainer. Let's repair some stuff. Let's bring back the repair industry instead of going, oh my gosh, it's torn, I'll throw it away and buy another one. And you get opportunities for that as well. Recycle, you can actually see, what is it? It's number 5th or 6th down the hierarchy. Whereas in most people's minds, there's often this linear default to recycle. Recycle is great, it's fantastic, needs to be done, but we can't recycle stuff that could be repaired or could be reused because it's a lower intervention. Governments, consumers seem to take a linear approach. So want to be educated. We want to do it for people to respect this waste hierarchy. Underneath that is recovery, which that's resource recovery, waste to energy, and then it's landfill, which is the worst. So it's amazing. Everyone loves it, but why don't people use it? Well, for governments, it's actually easy for governments to fund technology or innovation because it's like this shiny new object, and it's kind of good visibility, good PR. But actually, it's a lot cheaper and more effective to fund the things further up the hierarchy. Recycling companies also have a commercial agenda, and whilst want to help recycling companies do more, really they shouldn't be trying to disintermediate the waste hierarchy and recycle stuff that can be repaired or reused, because that harms the environment. It's not a zero-sum game. We need to follow through this hierarchy. So if we all adhere to this, the world would be a much better, cleaner, more environmentally sustainable place. Okay. We also want to reimagine the government's waste policies. We touched on the language. But again, what we're trying to do at Charitable Recycling Australia is encourage a holistic approach to this one. So I've commissioned a gap analysis through a consulting organization called MRA. They will complete in the next 2-3 weeks a gap analysis of all federal and state government policies based on the waste hierarchy. All of those interventions, and we'll see, what's happening. I have a sense that it's straight to recycling. There'll be a big gap there, but it'd be really interesting to see this gap analysis as an opportunity to accelerate and do a better job for better environmental impacts. We're also building an evidence base that will go hand in hand with that. And in October, November, Monash University will unveil the results of an Australian Research Council funded study to measure the benefits of charitable reuse in a circular economy. So this will actually show governments, organizations how to measure reuse. And once you know how to measure it, you can actually put it into policy. You can put targets against it. It will also define the triple bottom line impacts of reuse. So this is funded by the feds and also 3 state governments. So what we want to do is we want to get reuse integrated into government policy and funded. So gap analysis and also this Monash stuff hopefully will be a way to influence government. We also want to do a gap analysis against circular economy principles. So what do we mean by circular economy? Like it's quite a new term, right? It's last couple of years, but you know what? The principles have been in practice since the 1880s, since the first charity shop was opened here in Australia by the Salvos. So they've been keeping products in circulation, they've been reducing waste, they've been creating social and environmental good for 140 years. Then, Vinnie's, Red Cross, Save the Children, Lifeline, Anglefair, dozens more. We've been operating under these principles for such a long time. Doesn't it make sense for the government to fund something that's already working, already diverting 1 million tonnes from landfill? And definitely these horse and carts need upgrading. So today, you look at the circular economy today, there's a lot of talk, but very few leaders. One leader organization that kind of has a lot of respect and a lot of traction is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They put together a really fundamental, insightful definition of the circular economy. And essentially it comes down to 3 principles driven by design. So it's eliminating waste and pollution, circulating products at highest value, which refers back to the waste hierarchy, and also to regenerate nature. So, if you're interested in the circular economy, Ellen MacArthur Foundation is definitely the place to go. So it is the future where we move from this take, make, dispose to a circular economy where products are circulating. So take fast fashion, for example. If they could manufacture from 100% recycled fibers and use no virgin materials, you know what? They could have 365 seasons a year because it's a closed loop. If they use the same materials over and over again to make the clothes, that's fine, because then the waste goes back into the system. Or it could be an open loop, which is essentially using those materials, but you kind of make different products. So if the fibers are not so good, maybe you make, I don't know, carpet underlay or building tiles, which can be created through a mix of textile waste and glass. So lots of opportunities, but there's still fear and inaction in regard to not only the waste hierarchy, but the circular economy. That's because I think capitalism has conditioned us to think in linear ways, in straight lines, and we've got to unlearn this to recalibrate our minds around the circular economy. That takes guts, that takes courage and vision. And you kind of get why some companies will remain hesitant if they're fearful, if they don't know how to compete in this new circular economy. So there's a fear. I mean, I see a correlation between the waste hierarchy and Maslow's hierarchy. So imagine you're a company and you're so scared about this change, you're right down at the bottom, under food, security, safety. You're not going to self-actualize. So we've got to kind of move out of this, this fear to embrace this. So what do? I mean, from my side, I think we've got to advocate for the governments to reimagine their waste policies and embrace the waste hierarchy and circular economy principles to really start this moving forward more assertively. Then you go, how do we do this? So let me ask you a couple of ways. Would you call for revolution or would you call for evolution? So if you're young, energetic, idealistic, utopian and working outside the tent, you know what? Shout for revolution. But maybe if you're kind of like me, you're working inside the tent, it's maybe more pragmatic to work collaboratively with industry and with brands. But I think there's a role for both. One, to influence from kind of the next generation's needs and demands for the future, and also kind of the industry's pragmatism about how we work together and we sort of engender this change. So I see a role for both. We'll come back to revolution in a bit. In the meantime, can I update you kind of what we're doing, working collaboratively and progressively? So this is our work with the Australian Fashion Council. It is a federally funded $1 million grant for us to create a product stewardship scheme for clothing. This is the solution and the catalyst to fix the textile waste problem in Australia. It's also the catalyst to create a roadmap for textile circularity. So let me outline kind of, in essence, what this is about. So we've brought the whole industry together. I mean, there's 500 stakeholders. I mean, you can see some of our consortium partners and our collaborators. There's just everyone who has a role to play is included in this. So a product stewardship scheme for clothing will raise a levy on every item of new clothing put on the market in Australia, and that money will go for the interventions. So you imagine there's 1.4 billion items every year that we bring in or use in Australia. 1.4 billion. So if we put 1 cent on every item of clothing, that's $14 million. 3 cents, that's 42 million. That means a $5 t-shirt suddenly becomes $5.03, or maybe a bit of a markup, $5.05, right? It's a small amount, but 42 million or 14 million or 28 million, whatever it might be, can buy a lot of interventions. So the product stewardship scheme will design the means to set up a separate organization, a product stewardship organization that will kind of hold the funds and manage those investments. So that's also part of the roadmap. Come back to the waste hierarchy. Where would you spend 14 or 42 million? We haven't come to a figure yet. We're still working out what's doable, what's raisable. But you start with reduce, right? Design for durability, design for recyclability, fiber choices. There's funding for that. Reuse, increased collections, consumer educations, more donations into the charitable sector and also the commercial reuse sector. Funding for reuse, let's bring that back. And yes, of course, a big chunk of it will go to recycling. But before we can have the infrastructure for fiber to fiber domestic recycling in Australia scaled, and here we're talking chemical separations, cotton polyester, mechanical, enzymatic, the technologies are there, it's just not scaled. Before that can accelerate fast track into the future, we've got to get automated sorting and disassembly for clothes. Got to sort by fiber types, and also the disassembly, you've got to take off all the buttons and the zips and the bits and the bobs. This is no easy task. So there's also a lot of work being done in terms of creating some hubs for automated sorting and disassembly. So we're at the kind of the pointy end. This scheme needs to be ready by March 2023. And we're also working through raising that levy, and also working through what's doable in terms of the interventions to tackle the waste. But it needs to be guided by the waste hierarchy and circularity. So coming back to the waste hierarchy, this is the R strategies. You can see there's a few more here. And again, it's sort of semantics, but in the waste hierarchy, we had reduce. I've got here refuse and rethink. There's an exponential number here, but there are three different categories. One is smarter product use and manufacture. The second lump in the middle is extending the lifespan. And the third is the useful application of materials for recovery and recycling. But you can see circularity is more towards the top. So these R strategies are absolutely fundamental to the solution. But you know what? They've got to be funded. You look at circular economy principles, again, three areas. So design and production, how do you incentivize design that makes sense for the environment? Well, there's something called, in terms of the scheme, there's something called eco-modulation. So we raise a levy, but brands could get a discount or a reduction in that levy if they create, if there's more of an environmental impact through their design practices. So, you know, a single fiber is obviously better than 5 different types being put together because it's easier to recycle. So that's kind of design practices. Secondly, consumption and use and reuse. So durability is a no-brainer. You know, nobody benefits for clothes that sort of, you know, fall apart after 5 or 10 washes. So you need to promote durability so that it can be used and reused. But you don't want it too durable that it absolutely can't ever be recycled down the track. So there's a fine line there. There's also like responsible disposal and education campaigns for consumers as to how to care for clothes and how to dispose of them. And at the end, there's those pathways for the fiber to fiber recycling and also the creation of end markets for fibers. So it's exciting. It's just happening. The scheme will be designed in March 2023. Then the product stewardship organization will be set up, and then those interventions will begin to work through. But this is the best opportunity to fix the problem. It doesn't mean that organizations can't do their own thing along the sides, absolutely, but this will raise the funds for it. And you know what? Clothing is the best opportunity to advance circularity because you know, Celeste, you touched on this. We all love our clothes, right? We're attached to them. They're our identities. We express ourselves through them. And they're heaps more sexy than car tires, batteries, or mattresses. Not to say that car tires, batteries, and mattresses are not important. Yes, they are. But you know what? We've got a great opportunity with clothing. Yeah, so it's a great way to teach people about good stewardship. All right, part 2, data and evidence. Right, you started off with your figure, 85% textiles thrown away. Horrific. Yeah, really, absolutely. What would it look like if this figure was reversed? Yeah. There you go. The charity sector actually does recover 86%. It is reversed once it gets into the charitable sector because we have an amazing resource recovery rate. What we're saying here is within the charitable sector, 86% of the clothing that we receive, we can make use of. That is 6% ahead of the federal government's 2030 target for all waste streams. That's 80% of their target for 20. We're already there. Why are we there? Because we've been doing this for 140 years. Charities are highly efficient, highly effective, but most people don't realize this. So it's a no-brainer. First off, let's get usable clothing out of the red bin, out of the yellow bin, out of wherever it is, into the charitable sector where there's a triple bottom line impact. Some of the other data, and Celeste touched on this, this is through the charitable impact study conducted by MRA Consulting, again. So 1 million tons from landfill, we're the biggest network diverting household items. It's almost $1 billion for social good. So that's $1 billion towards the delivery of food for the hungry, shelter for the homeless, crisis support, counseling for those in mental distress, a wide range of illnesses and disability services right through to the care for our pets and animals. So this is the benefit of kind of the charitable sector and a triple bottom line economy. We also create 5,000 jobs a year and 1,200 of those for people who would otherwise face barriers. and 33,000 full-time equivalent volunteers. Without those 33,000 volunteers, we couldn't do this because it's a high volume, low yield business, but that's the impact the sector has. But we're going to talk about clothes. So let's talk about clothes. Bit of a small text on this slide. The 86% resource recovery rate we've already mentioned. Look at the carbon emissions, 66% reduction in carbon emissions because of reuse, because that means we don't need to remanufacture. That's where the savings come from. That's 888,000 tons of CO2 emissions saved per year. Water consumption is 89,000 megalitres. I can't imagine what 89,000 megalitres equates to, so I looked it up. It's about 20% of the water in Sydney Harbour every year, so it's a lot. I gave up on gigawatts. Anyway, 1.9 million megawatts a year. So that's a lot of power, right? So it's incredible the impact that we have. And that's just through textiles. So out of the million tons that we divert, 310,000 tons is clothing. And what happens to donating to donated clothing is based on its quality, all right? So if it's high value, high quality stuff, 51,000 tons or 16% gets sold in charity shops. And most of our customers are environmentally and socially conscious consumers, people that want to stand out from the mainstream, hippies, hipsters, high income earners. So the number one reason people shop at charity shops is for environmental impact or ethical shopping, not price. So that's a bit of a change in what's happened. Now, reuse. We also get another 100,000 tons of donations of wearable clothing that's not quite up to Australian consumers' expectations. So they would sit in a charity shop, they wouldn't sell for $5, wouldn't sell for $2, wouldn't sell for $1, but they're still okay. They're wearable. So these get exported to countries overseas where there are lower income consumers that want these products, and they're exported at 50 cents a kilo, 60, 70 cents a kilo. This is an important reuse market, and we'll chat about that in a second. About another third is rags, and this is kind of certain fabrics can be used, sort of like absorbent materials, tracheodacs and things that can be used by mechanics as rags. They're chopped up and they can be used. We're not kind of like screaming for donations of rags, but we're making use of what we get. But that $1 billion we raise, it comes from that, mostly from that 16% that's sold in charity shops. The reuse trade is about 50 million, 50, 60 million. So but you can see we're doing a pretty good job. 0.5% is given away to welfare, but still that's 1,600 tons. There's a lot of people in need in Australia, even though we're such a rich country. 43,000 tons goes straight to landfill, right? That's 14% is waste. Okay, a couple of myths. Myth number one, and we've chatted with Celeste on this one, that charities are overloaded. You've seen that stuff on the telly with the shows dumping. Charities are not overloaded, right? The media love to show this because clothing is sensational. It's like generates eyeballs, but it's just not true. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. 14% we can't use, and that costs us about $18 million. But you know what? We generate $1 billion through donations. So, you double your donations for $2 billion in income, we'll be happy to pay $36 million in waste costs. So not overloaded. The unintended consequences is that it reduces donations and it undermines trust. I mean, I've had conversations with so many well-meaning Australians that say, I love my Vinnies, or I love my Salvos, or I love my Red Cross. I don't want to burden them. I won't give them my stuff. So like, no, give them your stuff. We really want your stuff, but we want the good stuff, yeah? So please donate. Charities want and need more quality donations. Absolutely. The more that's donated in terms of quality items, the better good we can do. The other myth is that reuse exports are a waste. And again, this is also not true. Where did it come from? Well, you kind of think the government already defines a donation to a charity as waste. So, of course, if it's exported, it still is defined as waste. But people get confused. This is not like the government waste bans on plastic, paper, glass, and tires. It's very different. The plastics, paper, glass, and tires that came out of China sword, they're not being reused in their original form as clothing is. So, and also people who collect clothing don't get paid, unlike the other streams. We pick it up for free. Commercial companies pick it up for free, and we have to sell it to cover our costs. So it doesn't make any sense just to send stuff halfway around the world just to dump it. Also, everyone talks a lot about Ghana. Ghana's got pretty much nothing to do with Australia. It's maybe 1% of exports. Ghana is served by the US and Europe. Kenya is a much better example. There was an ABC documentary on Ghana, but that's been discredited as biased by the importer interviewed on the program himself, Emmanuel Yao Ajab. So he's issued a statement and also a letter as to how he feels he was set up, and he talks about the industry as gold. In Kenya, it's a model for reuse. There's 2 million jobs created, poverty reduction, especially for women, because a lot of the jobs in kind of markets is for women. So it's an important trade, and it's being harmed by dogma. The truth also is, if you stopped exporting these items for reuse, all that would happen is some other country would just manufacture brand new, cheap, new fashion. So it wouldn't create a problem, wouldn't create a solution. You'd have double the waste. So is it a perfect trade? No. Can some waste slip in? Yes. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because you harm people in need in overseas markets. You harm the charities, you harm the environment. But there's people who want transparency and accountability. So what we're doing is we've created a reuse export accreditation scheme for secondhand clothes that will be launched in 2 weeks, which sets a whole bunch of standards so that charities can actually demonstrate that they do sort effectively to cut out waste from that thing. And then again, we can realize the positive environmental and social benefits of that one. So that's coming. The other myth is that there is textile recycling in Australia. Absolutely not true. We can do it, but doesn't mean we are doing it. Yes, we can separate cotton from polyester, but this is nascent. It needs to be scaled. We want all of these commercial textile companies absolutely to succeed. The product stewardship scheme is an opportunity for that, but at the moment it's not happening. We don't want consumers to think that it's happening right now, because it undermines trust. It undermines the waste hierarchy. It can lead to greenwashing. So I think this should be realistic. It's not there yet. That's why we've got the product stewardship scheme, so we can work out ways of how to scale this so that they can actually make money, and we can create end markets. So the solution is coming, but we're not there yet. But yeah, it'll be an exciting time. So a lot of the funds will go towards creating that fiber to fiber recycling scalability in Australia, the sorting, the disassembly. So we're on the cusp. At the moment, there's something like 260,000 tons of clothing that goes to landfill in Australia each year. So that's what we need to tackle, as well as creating circularity. So exciting times. We're not yet, but we're getting there, and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So the third and final part of my update, it's all about you, the power of youth. Okay, let's face it, it's pretty cool to be young, right? You've got the energy, you've got the passion, you've got the idealism, and you've got the courage to ignite change. And maybe in a little way, it's also a little bit of your job to challenge the status quo. I mean, you don't all have to be Greta Thunbergs, but I would encourage you all to have your voice, speak up for what you believe in, and get your passions out there. And I say that with admiration. And also one of my favorite quotes, Oscar Wilde, he said, "The only thing wrong with the youth of today is that I am not one of them." So I'm with you in spirit, maybe not in years, but in spirit. Now, the only thing wrong with reuse charities, and charities are brilliant and amazing, is like maybe we're not moving fast enough digitally or perceived as quite sexy or cool or contemporary enough, but it's on our to-do list, and we really want to engage you to do that. You know, here's our to-do list. We want to see this cool vintage vibe in all shops. You look at the UK and they've got this down pat. Australia's still lagging behind. So we're working hard. There's some amazing charity shops, but you look at the bell curve, we've got to bring, you know, more of them across so that everyone is cool. We're launching a new vision for the charity shop of the future at our conference in October. This will look at the vibe, the environment, the merchandising, the product mix, the technology, realistically what charity shops can do to really accelerate a best practice model. We've launched some benchmarking study as well, so that, you know, every charity shop can compete as a best practice retailer. Pre-consumer brand partnerships, you know, again, talk about your ReclAIMEd program. I think there are massive opportunities for brands to partner with charities for, you know, programs like yours or take back schemes. Deloitte did a survey for Good 360, and then they reckon the pre-consumer items that have never been to market is $2.5 billion worth. That's just staggering, right? It's staggering. There's a massive opportunities for these brands to declare their pre-consumer items that haven't seen the light of day, to donate them to charity, to work with ReclAIMEd, to work with charity partners to get it out there, so that we fight textile waste the same way that we fight food waste. If you think about it, the food industry goes, yes, there's waste, but come on, you know, we're doing our bit. At the moment, the fashion industry hasn't quite sort of come good with, okay, there is this waste, and it's okay, so let's just deal with it. Huge opportunity. Next one is charity shops online. Okay, we've been a bit slow. Especially last couple of years hit with COVID and volunteer downturns, and it's pretty hard to get charity shops online. Some of them do it amazingly, but we need a much better collective model. So it's interesting. You know, the commercials are doing a great job in this area, but you kind of go, where do they get a lot of their products? A lot of them they get from the charity shops, because charity shops actually cater for resellers quite a lot. And yet there's kind of price point pressure on charity shops. People come and say, oh, you're a charity shop, it shouldn't be so expensive. But yet if it's on Depop, it's okay for it to be like 20 bucks more or 15 bucks more. And you go, hang on a minute. If this is the product and this is having a triple bottom line, why can't charity shops have the same price point? So there are some challenges, but yeah, we need to move that forward. We also need to challenge the historical assumptions of volunteering at charity shops as old, boring, and rigid. And we're funding a volunteer drive to help kind of that change into more contemporary, flexible volunteering around impact and catering to the needs of the next generation. So it's coming. Help us go online, help us improve our shops, help us create that vibe. And you can do that by volunteering. And I think there are plenty of opportunities. So talk to some charities about coming in and volunteering, because we need the next generation as part and parcel of this. You know, our environmental and social credit is so high, 1 million tons diverted, $1 billion raised, and 880,000 tons of carbon emissions saved. So we're pretty cool, but kind of we need you. So revolution, come on, shout for change. Shout at the government. Tell them to respect the waste hierarchy, fund reuse, embrace circularity, move this forward. Shout at the brands, ask them to design for circularity, to reduce waste and manufacture for durabilities. And yes, be fair, shout at the charities too, tell us to hurry up and go online. Tell us to get sexier to engage you into the future. Tell us how we can actually improve that model to engage you. Come on, this is the power of youth. It's a wonderful opportunity. So kind of influence all of us equally. And remember, the best place to shop and donate and volunteer is your local charity shop or your social enterprise retailer. So check us out, join our community, take over our community. We need that vitality, and keep advocating, find your voice if you haven't already and express your passions, because the world needs you. Thank you. Back to you, Celeste.
Amazing. Wow. So much to unpack there. I have written so many notes. I hope everyone listening got some really good stuff out of that. That was amazing. You covered so many different areas, but just on the last thing that you were saying about youth, we should do reclaimed pop-ups in big charity stores. We'll bring the youth, we'll bring the fun, we'll bring the imagination, and we can work together on something like that. Would be really cool. And I'm sure Jack is watching this having a lot of ideas about how we can work together as well. I can sort of hear his brain ticking from here. And, you know, I'd also love to just finish that off by acknowledging the Indigenous knowledge systems that we're working with. Is, you know, waste is a new thing. And, you know, nature doesn't waste. Waste is a design flaw. And so all of these ideas around reuse and upcycling, it's inherently in us as humans. So we can do it. I feel really positive and hopeful after that. Thank you so much. A couple of questions coming in. So let's get straight into that. First one is about, you know, this bit of PR problem that we were talking about with sustainable fashion and circularity. Question is, Omer, how can we foster a culture of clothing circularity and empower communities and individuals to change their practices?
Wow, great question. Yeah, that's such a big question and such a good one. I think it comes down to a couple of things. When you talk about circularity, it's not just one party changing stuff, it's a number of parties. So what do we have to do concurrently? And I don't want to say the chicken and the egg thing, because that leads to a negative connotation, but we've just got to get it started. We need to do a couple of things. We need to, first of all, let's say from my point of view, we're working with the brands. And a lot of them are looking at the future going, hey, you know, gosh, you know, we need to change because we've got to reset for the future. How do we make this big jump? We need to create a path for them that is safe for them to shift. That's A. So how do we do that? That's through things like the product stewardship scheme. One of our partners is WRAP in the UK. If you guys haven't heard of WRAP, W-R-A-P in the UK, amazing organization, leaders in textiles, plastics, and food. They also do fight food waste here. So you know, they worked with brands in the UK, and I think over 50% of them got involved with their first 10-year plan. So the first step for them is they get, if you can save some money on saving waste costs, that's a no-brainer for a commercial brand. So you save your money. Then the next step is, how do you design for durability? How do you get to the next step? So it's to do it step by step by step. No one is there yet, but we're on the journey with the brand. We just have to keep encouraging them to keep doing those small steps. One of the ways is through product stewardship. We'll set some targets collectively. We can't force it on them. You know, there'll be a target for there are many different metrics. Could be a percentage that's reused or percentage of recycled fibers. We set the targets together so the brands move, you know, progressively to do these scary decisions, right? On the other hand, so that's kind of like the working inside the tent. The other one is, you know, if all of you are screaming and shouting and going, you know what, I want circularity, they're going to go, oh gosh, all my future consumers are yelling at me about this. That'll shift it a little bit as well, right? And I think that's the power of the people. Absolutely, you've got to do that. And then, of course, there's the education. The education campaign is we've got to educate consumers, like that you go and you buy, I don't know, a dress or a shirt, and you take a picture of yourself on Instagram or TikTok and then you dump it. That's just, you know, ludicrous. We have to educate people that, you know what, it's okay to be seen in the same top twice. In fact, it's a good thing. And that, you know, clothing that, you know, it's good for you. Craig Rucastle sort of says this, it's good for the environment, it's good for you. It's actually quite nice to wear something that's quality, it's going to last. And it's okay, and it's good. So we need to shift consumers' mindsets. We need to, you know, push the brands with the people power. We need to work with them about what it looks like. And then also the government. The government's got to play a part here. It's like, come on, you know, and they are doing some good stuff, but we just got to accelerate it.
Yeah.
So
I think,
Cool.
yeah, that question really made me think about the education piece, because empowering individuals to change their practices, getting everyone to look at their clothing as starting this off is, we still have that disconnect. And as customers, there's a transparency barrier with the brands on, where was my stuff made? Is it made with recycled fabrics? And
Mm.
just mindlessly buying stuff without knowing what it is. And, I get really annoyed that it's meant to be our problem as individuals, when it is at that brand level and it is at that company level. It's their responsibility to be educating. But that makes me really excited about the Stewart product ship scheme, that a part of that chunk of cash is going to be for education. So I'll be really interested to see how that sort of plays out.
Yeah.
Jumping to question 2. This is one that gets asked a lot. So, how do we remove the elitism that often accompanies sustainable fashion? Often these terms are quite complicated and niche.
Oh, okay, you're making me work today, aren't you? Right? Yeah.
Great questions.
Yeah, cool. Good question. Good question. That's a really good one. So by elitism, are we talking about price points? Are we talking about the affordability to make choices and buy different types of products? Is that
I would
the
say
essence
so.
of the
Let's
question?
go in that stream of thinking, because it is something that I hear all the time, that sustainable fashion is so expensive.
Yeah.
So it's not
Okay.
inclusive for lower
Right.
socioeconomic communities.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So couple of things. We need to accelerate what works. I'm a big believer in inclusivity and also equity. I think are fundamental principles. Okay, but you can think of it this way. So there's some work. If you've got more resources, more income, of course, it's easier to make those choices, right? So that's fine. And I think if you're in that one, make those choices. But this is how some brands are actually thinking about the future. And I won't share any names, but there are some names of brands that operate at lower price points, and they're working with charities and also with organizations to be able to try to create a closed loop of recycled fibers that they can keep using, right? Because if you're making $5 t-shirts, right, maybe you're never going to make $100 t-shirts, right? But maybe if you can actually shift that and find a cost model where you're actually these fibers are coming back into your system, and you can actually keep doing that at that lower cost, it can suddenly make that available to consumers who only want to buy $5 t-shirts, right? So tough, it's hard, it's not easy, but there is conversation in that. So that's where I see that happening, as opposed to sort of kind of point blank. We don't want to get involved in dogma inside the tent, because it's not helpful. But you can get involved with dogma outside the tent, that's fine, because it might engender change. But so there are people that will still need $5 t-shirts or $10 t-shirts, but let's make them out of recycled fabrics. Let's make them last longer so that they have another life. So there is some conversations there. I mean, and you kind of go, that's because these brands that are in that space want to survive and thrive into the future. So that's one avenue. I don't think I fully answered that question, because perhaps it's a really interesting one that's complex, and it's not. Do you know what I mean? It's not like we've got the answers. We've got a consortium, and even with that, we're still struggling, doing our best to make the right decision. So great question. Thank you.
Yeah, no, amazing. I think it's so complicated, and there's so many different facets that will help solve that problem. And again, what it makes me think of is the education piece, because through very clever marketing companies and through capitalism and through, this consumption market that we're in, we believe clothing should be a certain price that's actually not true.
Yes.
So if we go back to our individual belief systems, we think you should be able to buy a t-shirt for $5. When did we ever think that? And if you look at the supply chain, it can take 10 people over 3 different countries to make a t-shirt.
Yep.
How do you think they're getting paid? And so, I'm a really big advocate for standing up for communities who perhaps are lower socioeconomic backgrounds that can't buy $100 t-shirts, and finding ways that we can connect them to sustainable clothing, which is pieces from charity stores, for example. But we've got the wrong idea about what fashion costs. And going to your point of talking about, that 14% of stuff that's sent to charity that's gone straight to landfill because the quality is so low. We need to stop producing these crappy quality garments that have no purpose, last us 5 wears, and then can't even be resold. But the thing with quality clothing is it does cost more to make. For something to last a long time, it needs to be sewn properly. It needs to be using beautiful fabrics. And so gosh, there's a lot to unpack there. But it was fantastic to talk through that with you. I'm so pleased to have had you on here today and excited to potentially work with you in the future. And I hope everyone got a little bit of something from this. Those of you who maybe weren't even interested in sustainable fashion before this, I hope this has planted a seed for you. And like Omar said, got you inspired to get shouting, and let's connect and shout together.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Celeste. I've really enjoyed it, and continue the great work that you're doing. And yeah, cool. So here's to a sustainable fashion future.
Amazing. Thanks. Signing off. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Take care.